Welcome to Solutions with Courtney Anderson. I'm Courtney Anderson, and this is episode 240. This is a show that's part of our Financial Fierceness series. Financial fierceness is what it sounds like. We're talking about finance, and we are fierce. We are strong. We are proactive. We are strategists. Our goals, of course, are to attain and sustain financial independence and autonomy. It's where we have enough income coming in from our diversified resources that we're not going to be financially devastated or ruined if we lose one income stream. So if we lose a job or just one income stream, we still have enough passive income, especially. So that's income that comes in where we don't go and we don't go out and engage in labor for the income. So it's rent that comes in from a rental property, or it's interest that comes in on funds that we have invested. So that's our goal: attain and sustain and maintain our financial independence and autonomy. And of course, there's a lot of other issues that are important about our finances and how that relates to our goals for ourselves, our careers, our families, communities, and the future, even after we're gone. So many people spend substantial amounts of time and energy on charitable trusts and foundations and all different types of things that we can do to be of service to other people once we are able to have an excess amount of financial resources in terms of our own independent sustenance. So if somebody's not able to pay for their own bills, then most likely they're not going to be able to create charitable vehicles to help other people, right? So we're going to help ourselves, and then we can help other people. So Financial Fierceness is our series. It's episode 240. I'm Courtney Anderson, and our specific show today is Behind on Bills? What to Pay First. Again, our show topic today is Behind on Bills? What to Pay First. So we're talking about if someone is in our financial fierceness area and yet they have a situation, most likely have not yet attained and certainly aren't maintaining our financial independence and autonomy if we have this situation, but we're on our way to financial independence and autonomy, right? That's why we're asking these questions. So if somebody has a situation where they say, hey, I'm behind on bills, right? What do I pay first? And this is the kind of thing certainly I've seen in a lot of different areas of my life. As an attorney, when I used to practice full time and I handled bankruptcies especially, and also some other small business issues, and did some family law, specifically dealing with divorces, things of that nature. This issue, I'm behind on bills, what do I pay first, is really important. And not understanding this issue negatively impacts people in all types of ways. And there are people who, they're behind on bills, not understanding what to pay first, didn't make the best strategic plan, and now they've got criminal charges because they didn't pay, a speeding ticket. And yes, that happens. And yes, and in many instances, you don't pay a speeding ticket, something minor like that. There's even parking tickets, something relatively minor, but you don't pay them, and then you get serious consequences, especially the ones with speeding tickets. You can have a warrant issued for your arrest. They can arrest you for that. Law enforcement can. Certainly, I'm speaking to the U.S. legal system, and specifically, I practice full-time in the state of Texas. Parking tickets, unpaid, it's not a huge thing you might think. But in many instances, in many jurisdictions, what will happen is they're going to go, the people are represented, of course, by the government. The government has different ways of serving the people. One of them is law enforcement, criminal justice. So they, through those apparatus, may and often do take your property. So, your vehicle, going to work, behind on bills, and pay parking tickets. Now you go and you want to drive your vehicle, and now you're unable to drive it because it's been towed. It's gone. They took it. They literally physically picked it up, put it on a tow truck, and drove it somewhere and impounded it. So it's not even there. And or sometimes they won't physically tow it yet, but they'll put sometimes it's called a boot. So it's a piece of equipment that's put on a vehicle that stops the vehicle from being driven. So now you still can't use it. And you have to pay more money to get the boot taken off, or to go to the impound lot and pay a whole bunch of extra fees to get your vehicle out. So you could be arrested, you could have your property taken, you could have your credit negatively impacted. So for in the U.S., 7 years, in some instances 10 years, literally 10 years. This negative bill payment thing will prevent you for 7 to 10 years from getting a great place to stay with a mortgage, or having even your rent approved, being able to buy a new dishwasher 7 years down the road. I mean, it's ridiculous how long people can be shackled and hobbled by and held back, right, from success in life because of one time 5 years ago I was behind on bills and I didn't know what to pay first. And now look at all this. This is horrible. I have a criminal record, or my credit's ruined, and I can't even get a place now. It's 5 years later. So when I say 7 to 10 years, what I'm saying is, and we did a multiple part show on credit. And so credit scores, credit reports. So please look at that. When you go to CourtneyAnderson.com, which is our central website, on CourtneyAnderson.com, we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages of content, and we've got individual show sites for all of the programs. So CourtneyAnderson.com, and then slash the rest of the URL will take you to this show site. So this is episode 240. So just go to CourtneyAnderson.com or put in CourtneyAnderson.com episode 240. Boom, it'll take you right there. And the full long URL for the individual show page is also in the notes, in the tags that are embedded on each of the files. So even if you found our program on a distribution partner like iTunes or Libsyn or iHeartRadio or anywhere else around the world, in the tags you should see the full long URL for you to copy and paste. So there's all kind of cool ways to get there. They are cool, right? The deal is get there, right? And there are links to these other multiple part shows we did in the past on the credit issues, credit reports, and credit scores. So in the States, most negative information can stay on consumer credit reports for 7 years, and some negative information can stay for 10 years. And that's public information, usually like a bankruptcy, things of that nature, judgment against you. Again, so you're behind on bills, you don't pay some things. We talked about, hey, I didn't pay my speeding ticket. Uh-oh, now there's a warrant for my arrest. I'm behind on bills, I didn't pay my child support. Uh-oh, there's a warrant for my arrest. So now we're not just talking about I'm behind on my bill, we're talking about, I've been arrested. So in addition to being arrested, I got to bail out. I have a criminal record now. I got to hire a lawyer. Like, see where this is going? Like, this is not awesome. Or I'm behind on my bills, and now my credit's ruined for 7 years or 10 years. So you're stuck, like I said, 5, 6, 7, even 9, 10 years down the road, and you're still having to deal with the ramifications of this one time you're behind on your bills. It's like, ugh, yuck. So we need to have a strategy. One of the things on the show notes and the 14 points that are highlighted, and those 14 items making up the one solution, I call that a Stone of Solutions. I make the point in those notes that, look, just because you're broke doesn't mean you don't need a plan. In fact, if you're broke, you really need a plan. You need a plan more than if you were not broke. And I'm making a couple of assertions here. One, if you're behind on your bills, you can't pay your bills, then you are broke. You might be temporarily broke. It might be short-term broke. It might be just a little bit of brokenness, but you're broke. And I did a show in our failure flashback series, which is a tough series to do, but I've gotten feedback from people that it can be helpful, where I just talk about my failures. Now, of course, I don't talk about all of them, because that would literally be, we could do, who knows, millions of shows on just my failures if we did all of them. But we're narrowing it to failures that are related in some way to some of our areas of our shows, not just all of them, right? Not just because that would probably be a never-ending list. So I did it shows in that series on I'm broke. So a lot of the things that we talk about, I learned from experience way before I was able to, become an attorney and have my own law firm and then go out and help clients. So it's not just this is what happened when I did this as a lawyer, but I lived this. Now, have I lived every type of experience? No, I've never had a child support order out on me. So I've never been in a situation where I owe child support. So I've never been in a situation where I've been behind on child support. For me, just me individually in my regular life. I've certainly worked with a lot of people as a lawyer who had that situation. But so, yeah, I haven't been in that situation. But so I haven't done everything. I mean, who has? But I've been broke, and I understood that from the experience of that being in that situation. Like, I have X amount of dollars, but I owe X plus more in bills. What do I pay first? I've done it. Have I done it, yesterday? No. Have I done it exactly the way your life is, exactly where you are? No. I'm not you. You're not me. But I've been in that situation, and then I've spent other years in other capacities helping other people who are in that situation. So that's where a lot of this is coming from. And then, of course, as always, we've got some research and some links to some other sources there in the show notes. So let's keep going. So the first thing I'm trying to do is come to some candor about behind on bills equals broke, even if it's temporary, even if it's short term, because a lot of people get caught up in the denial. And this is not the place for denial, because denial will end up with, warrants for your arrest. It will end up with, your credit being negatively impacted for, a decade. And it's mostly denial. What happens is people get behind on bills, which happens. It's happened to me. It's happened to most people at some point. Some people were born into, wealth and have never even paid a bill. But that's not anywhere near a large number of people. Geez. That's a beyond minuscule percentage of people. And, maybe somebody's born into, a elite family or something of that nature. But, I mean, those people you can literally name them. I mean, there are not many of them, right? And usually you can name them. They're literally royalty, or they're born into some sort of very powerful and wealthy family. And you can name them for a reason, because there's 7 billion plus people on the planet right now, and we can't name all the rest of them because they weren't born into it. That's how rare it is to be born in a situation where you've never paid a bill your whole life, don't even know what one is, right? Because there's so much inherited wealth and so much passive wealth from all the things that your family and owns. So that's rare. I mean, that's beyond rare, right? So let's talk. We're not talking about those people. We can name them. Talk about all the rest of the people. You and I wasn't born into that, and most people weren't. Some people are born into it, but then for whatever happens, the family loses it. So, okay. All right, so behind on bills, we're just calling that broke, just for the interest. We're saying denial is a huge problem. What happens is people behind on bills, and then, because it is normal, it's not anything that's not normal, it happens all times to people. Hope it happens to almost everybody at some point. We think, well, it's not a big deal, right? We don't want to get stressed out. And then we pretend. An easy way to pretend used to be, because before we had internet, the way we have it now, where everybody in society that could have hardware and software can access it. But before we had this, you literally would get a bill like in the mail. It would be like a piece of paper. So what a lot of people would do is people would come to my law office, okay? So I'm practicing law full time in the past. People come to my law office, and they would call because they have financial challenges, and we're going to talk about potentially maybe even bankruptcy. I said, bring with you to me to the meeting at my office, my law office, all of your bills, so we can get a feel for what's really going on. And the majority of the time, people would bring like a stack of letters, like bills, and they were unopened. Because what people would do is they're behind on bills. They know they're behind on bills. And the stress you have when you open a bill, for most of us, and we can't pay it, is we're stressed out. So a denial, a way to not get so stressed out, is just don't open it. And I know it sounds illogical, but in a way it actually makes sense. If I did a show in this series, Financial Fierceness, about how much I enjoy paying taxes, right? So that was a show, because my point in there was I only pay taxes because I make money. If I didn't make any money, I didn't pay any taxes. So when I pay taxes, what I'm really doing is counting up how much money I made, which, yeah, that makes me feel good, right? When you look at a bill that you can't pay, you feel bad. So an easy way not to feel bad is don't look at the bill. So in a way, like I said, that does make some logical sense. The challenge, of course, though, is by not looking at the bill, and the longer you do this, most of the time people will come to my office, my law office, and for the financial assessment to see if there was potentially a need for considering bankruptcy. They hadn't opened their bills, and it hadn't been like they hadn't opened their bills in 3 or 4 days. They hadn't opened their bills in months. They were really behind. And because they hadn't opened their bills in a while, they didn't even know exactly how much they owed, right? They had an idea of sort of what it was, but when you get behind on your bills, especially in the States, but in many parts of the world, it works like this. There's a contract that you enter into. So let's say it's your water to where you live, so that when you turn the sink on, the water comes out, right? Or when you use the toilet, the water, you go to the shower and bathroom, water comes out. Where does the water come from? Well, in many parts of the U.S. that are tied to the city utilities, so it's usually a government utility that you're tied to. Now, some places have well water, where you literally, what it sounds like, they have a well on site. Those are in areas where you have more land, because you need to have the land to have it. So it's usually in a more rural area. But in most dense areas or cities and urban areas or suburban areas, you're tied into a utility. It's usually a government where your water, they take care of the water. Meaning, they have huge, wastewater and treatment and sewage, and then they're all the pipes that are laid, and all, the massive infrastructure goes to deliver water to people's places, in your apartment, your flat, your house. So you either pay some entity, whether it's a government or it's a private business. In some other utilities, if you have electricity, sometimes that's government, sometimes it's a private service. It's a private company. So whoever it is, you pay. But there's a contract that you enter into, right? So you're going to pay X amount for whatever you use, or for whatever the time period is, whatever the deal is, right? And then if you're late, they start adding on extra fees. So you're not just paying whatever it was that you used, right? However much electricity you used, or however much natural gas you used, or whatever, or how much water you used, but you're using that plus these other fees, like a late fee, and they just start adding up. The later it gets, the worse the fees are. So at some point, you owe whatever was the actual amount of the service or the resources that you used, and then you start to add all these other fees on top of it, and those fees can add up, so that at some point they can sometimes exceed what the actual amount was that you used. The longer you go without looking at the bill, the harder it is for you to know what you owe. And I'm just talking about utilities. We're not even talking about anything where you have interest. All right, so let's break it down. You're behind on bills. What do you pay first? Well, the answer is you pay first the things that are the most dangerous not to pay. The challenge is figuring out what's the most dangerous not to pay is going to be different based on who you are and your situation. So there are a couple of things that I posted on the show page. One of these is from a legal aid legal aid organizations in the States and the U.S. that are there to help people for often low income or low fees, because private lawyers cost amounts of money. So legal aid is an organization in many parts of the U.S. that lawyers can volunteer and give services, either free or reduced services, to people through legal aid. All right, so this is from the New Hampshire Legal Aid. All right, so I've got the link on the website, on my website, on the show page, to their website, and it says always pay your most important bills first. I totally agree with that. That's what I was just saying. It says if you cannot pay all of your bills, you have to decide which bills to pay first. Duh, it's the reason we're doing the show. The most important bills are the bills with the worst consequences if they are not paid. Okay, so they use the words worst consequences if not paid. I said most dangerous. Same idea. What's going to be the most damaging to you if you don't pay it? And we're going to prioritize our bills backwards from that. So again, I have the link to legal aid on that page. I have another link to a financial resource from the finance industry, banking finance industry, and it has their own priorities, right? So you'll see that on the show page with the link, and it says rules for prioritizing bills. So same question, right? I'm behind. What do I pay first? So they're saying 1, pay family necessities first. 2, pay housing related bills. 3, keep utilities on. 4, pay a car loan or lease. All right. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to have to sit down with, I'm saying pen and paper or a tablet or something, but you need to write it down. So don't do this in your memory, because it's not going to work. It's not going to be as effective. You need to sit down and commit it to writing. So it could be on a piece of paper or a napkin or chalk on the ground. I really don't care, but you need to write it down so you can see it. Don't just sit there in your head and say, I can just see it in my head. No, you need to write it down. All right. Okay. The first thing that you're thinking of are the basic things. Like, okay, I put a link on the show page to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And so I put a link to the resource I have. Maslow is known for many things as an expert, and specifically with this hierarchy of needs, it's what it sounds like. He was researching, and he was looking at sort of, what is it that we as humans, okay, need, and he also then had a model for sort of where we are on that, on his where an individual human would be on this model, okay, of sort of where they've progressed, okay. And so the basic thing that he talked about, his original hierarchy, he talked about your biological and your physiological needs, so air, food, drink, shelter, things of that nature, right? And we're going to go with this for a bit. The first thing you need to think about are those basics, your biological and physical needs. In other words, biological is really what it sounds like. If I don't get something to drink, I'll die of dehydration at some point. If I get nothing to eat long enough, I'll just die of starvation. It's just accurate. If I'm out in the elements, depending on what the elements are, so if you're somewhere and it's, a snow blizzard and it's freezing outside, then you're going to die if you're outside long enough without enough warmth and protection. You'll just die of exposure to how cold it is. The same works, I live in the desert. I live in the Mojave Desert, so it gets really warm, we'll say, in the summers here. And if you're out in our summers without protection, just out in the sun, and it's 100, and 18 degrees, Fahrenheit, you're going to be in distress and you may die. It's the same type of thing, right? We're humans, right? So our body is at a certain temperature, and there's only a certain range we can go outside of that temperature, out in the elements, without having real distress and or, disability and or death. I mean, that's us. We're human. So you need to start with that. You need shelter, and you need eating and something to drink, because otherwise you're going to die. Now, here's where people lie to themselves. So let's say you're somebody and you have a place that you pay for. Let's say you have an apartment, and you think, well, yeah, I need shelter, or else I'm gonna die. I'll be outside in the elements. It's too hot. It's too cold. I'll die. So I'll just pay my rent. Maybe. Hold on though. Is there somewhere else where you can get that housing and shelter met? Is there somewhere else you can go to get a place you need shelter? Because out in nature, unless it's the perfect temperature and you have resources to the food and the water, your biology and your physiological needs, then you're risking death. So here's what happens. You have your own place, and this is what happened to me, right? When I shared the programs that I referenced where I talked about this. But one of the things I talked about at that point, I wanted to, I need a place to stay. And sometimes we have options where there are places we could stay, we don't want to stay there. So maybe you have a sister, and maybe you don't really get along with her, but the reality is, if you're really up against it, that you may have to say, hey, I'm going to have to move in with my sister, even though I don't really like her, because that's the place. There's shelter, there's also water there, and food. It may be, you have a great uncle, or it could be anybody, your friend you knew in second grade, just anybody. If there's a place you can go and stay and you can get shelter and food and water, just start with shelter. But access to utilities so you can, get cleaned up and be able to go out in society without, being, odorly offensive, right? Because you haven't bathed or cleaned yourself. You need to be realistic. If you cannot afford to stay where you're staying because you can't pay the rent, or you can't pay your part if you've got roommates, you got to tell people. What a lot of people do is get in denial, and they'll think, well, everything will turn around. Maybe. But there's only two parts to money. I need to spend less, or I need to make more. And then you can combine those. But that's it. And most of the time, and I'm speaking here to a very specific system, it's defined. Like in the U.S., usually things are on a monthly basis. So you pay, and then you got another month, and then you're paid up, and then they'll give you another bill. And so, most of the time in the States, even rent is like that. Like it's monthly. Now there's some other countries and parts of the world where you pay all up front, or you don't pay, or you don't have, you either pay for a year or you're not even living there. So that prevents some of this. But if you're going month to month, or sometimes even week to week, if you don't have the money, then you need to be honest to yourself early, and don't lie and say, well, I could pay the rent now, but if I pay the rent, I won't have the money to pay for anything else. When I talked about what's most dangerous to you, and I talked about the two parts that you have, spend less, make more, right? One of the things I'm going to argue that you need to ask yourself is, I need to protect or preserve any income stream. If you have a job, you need to do what you need to keep the job. So people spiral, right? So people start thinking, well, I need to pay my rent because I don't want to have to move in with my sister because she gets on my nerves, so I'll just stay here. Okay, so you pay your rent, but then you don't have the money to pay for your vehicle to get to work, so then your vehicle is, you owed money on it, right? The reason I said, when you talk about pay vehicle, I'm talking about you borrowed money for the vehicle, so you have to pay either weekly or monthly or bi-weekly or whatever. You have to make a payment on the car to the people that you borrowed the money from to get the car. If you don't pay the money with the car, what a lot of times will happen now, depending on where you bought it and the terms of the deal, they'll either come, the people you owe the money to for the car, will come physically pick the car up. They'll just come take it. They'll repossess it, right? And their contracts allow them to do that in most instances. Or in some instances, and these are really bad deals, but sometimes people do what they have to. Some places will lend you money for the car, but they'll have software on the car that if the payment doesn't come, if the payment was due on Thursday at 5 p.m. and it's not there and it's 5:01, they have software they can just push the software wherever their computer is, and they can just disable the car. So you were late and they'll just turn it off. The car won't work. So, then they can come in if they want to or not, but it doesn't really matter because they also have a GPS, global positioning satellite. They have a tracking device on it. So they don't have to even, wonder where the car is. They can monitor it at all times. Just turn on their own computer. There's the GPS that's in the car. They know where the car is. And then they can turn it off if you don't pay. There have been some lawsuits and actions in the U.S. because people were, driving down the road when they did this, and they could have been injured, right? They just turned the car off because they said people didn't pay. Sometimes that was a mistake. The software didn't do what it was supposed to, or they pushed the software button to turn the car off, but they made a mistake. The person had paid their bill, whatever. My point is, you need to preserve your income. You really need to preserve your income. You need to look at two things to start with: preserve my income, and the other thing is sort of Maslow's basic, my biological and physiological needs. And you got to be honest. If you do something to jeopardize your income, then you're not making good choices. And people do this. So like I said, they don't pay the car note knowing the car is the only way they get to work. Or they use the car for work, right? Maybe they're a delivery driver. And so they don't pay the car note because they went and paid rent, right? And now the car was disabled or repossessed, and now they can't get to work, so now they're fired. In the U.S., yes, in many jobs, it's exactly how it works. You don't show up for work, then, then they can terminate your agreement because where are you? You're supposed to be here. And if your job requires you to have a vehicle and you don't have one, and even if you did show up on the bus or you just walked there, then they're going to say, where's your car? And then you say, well, I lost it. And then they're going to say, well, yeah, but you're a driver. Like, your job is to deliver products or deliver, food or, deliver packages. Like, you had to have one. That was part of the deal. If you've got to start with this simultaneous two big things: preserve your income. If you have a job, you need to keep it. This is not the time to lose that little bit of money. I say little bit because whatever it is wasn't enough to pay everything you owe right now. So in that context, a little bit. Do not lose your job. Do not pay a bill thinking, oh, I need to pay this. By doing so, you're jeopardizing the things that will help you make money. You have got to think about preserving your income. And I'm putting it right up there with shelter. Because let's look through the shelter thing. If there's literally nobody you can go to, because you may think, I don't have a sister, I don't have a relative, I don't know any relatives, I don't know anybody. And you just start moving down the list of options. So in many parts of the world, there are options for cheaper places where you can stay, like, for a couple of days, like a weekly rent hotel room. That it's not going to be fancy, but it'll be functional. It'll have, utilities and have water, and it's going to be cheaper than it is paying a month usually in a whole on an apartment or a house. But it's weekly though, and it's not as stable, and you're not going to be able to stay there long term. But it may be something in the short term. So let's say you owed your rent and you said, "Oh my gosh, I owe $500 in rent, but I don't have it, or I don't have all of it." You could, if it's possible, you might think, well, this place down the road, I only have to pay, $80 a week. So I could move there for 2 weeks. It's only $160. That's a lot cheaper than $500 for rent. But every place that you go to make a decision, there's a consequence. So if you don't pay your rent, then what's going to happen? They're going to evict you. If you don't want to wait for them to evict you, an eviction in these states, then they're going to they can evict you by going to court and having a judge rule that you didn't meet the terms of the contract. Usually you didn't pay the rent, and then get a court order from a judge to do a formal eviction. But before that, in most parts of the U.S., they're going to like put letters on your apartment or your house that you owe rent on. Who's they? It's the people that you owe the money to. What money? The rent, right? So if you're renting something, then that somebody else owns that thing, whether it's a car, right, that you're renting or leasing, or it's an apartment or a house or a place to stay or a trailer or whatever. It's a physical like dwelling. Somebody else owns it, and because they own it, that's an asset that gives them income. That's the part you're working on getting towards. When we talked at the outset about financial independence and autonomy, I said you own stuff that gives you money. That's an example of it. Whoever owns your property, your landlord, that they're doing what you're doing. In the future, if you're not doing it now, they own an asset, and because they own it, somebody else pays them money. That's what we talked about. We just talked about this. So you want to be on that side of this in the future, because that's part of being financially diversified and income, and autonomous, and not being dependent on any one income. So it's a good thing. It's an awesome thing. Yet when you're on the side of you're the one that doesn't own the property, and you're just paying amounts of money to be able to use it for certain periods of time, and you don't pay, whoever owns the property has the right to get the property back. That's what it is. An eviction is them just getting their property back so somebody else can come and pay rent there, because you weren't. But the car, it's the same type of thing. They owned it, right? Or they had an interest in it, depending on how you structured it. So it could be that you actually were just leasing or renting it. Or it could be that they said that you could go ahead and have a contract to buy it over time. But in either event, whether or not you were leasing it or you were buying it with the money backed by their funds, they still have the right to take their property back. So if you don't pay the car or the motorcycle or whatever, they'll just come take it back, and then so they'll just turn around and let somebody else either rent it or enter into a contract for purchase over time. So because the thing is, they want their money. So when you're the landlord, right, when we talk about these shows, and that's the situation I've been in for what year is it? I've been a landlord for like over 15 years as of the time of the show, right? So when you're on that side of it, it makes total sense. Like the whole purpose is I have an asset, and I need it. It's an income generating asset. So I can't have people that aren't paying the money, because then it defeats the whole purpose of it, right? But when you're the one who has, in the situation where you're behind on your bill, you got to be brutally honest with yourself and don't lie. This isn't the time to play games and pretend. You need to go through every one of those bills that you haven't opened and or haven't looked at the email, and you need to or log into their website, or or get on the customer service line, and you need to find out exactly how much money you owe, and you need to write it all down. I said earlier, don't do this in your head. You got to write it down, because you need to see the brutal numbers. The numbers are only brutal just because temporarily right now you're broke, but you got to face it. And then you have to tell yourself realistic things. So a lot of people think, well, I'll feel better if I keep my apartment. Yeah, but by doing that, if you can't pay your car note, you lose your car, you can't get to work, you're fired from your job. Now you've made it worse. What do you pay first? Again, you have two things. I said preserve income, and I also said you need to look at your basics. You need something to eat, something to drink, and a place to stay. The place to stay thing is hard because people get mad and they'll say, I don't want to stay with that relative, or I can't stand my sister. I get you, but this is a very difficult time, and there's choices. Moving in with your sister that you don't like might be tough, right? Just don't talk to her, but it'll give you breathing room, because if where you are is $500, if a weekly place is $160 every 2 weeks, but your sister is free, come on. I've known people, they're broke and maybe they don't have any relatives, but they ask people, maybe people that they knew from school or from work. It's embarrassing for anybody. But here's the deal. Except for the few people who are born into some sort of nobility or wealth or whatever, and then they live their whole life like that and nothing ever happened where their money went away. That's, like we said, very few people on the whole existence of humanity. Everybody else has had either their own experience with their own version of being broke, or they've known somebody who has. So this is not anything for you to be embarrassed about. It's time to be real, though, and you need to ask for help. We talk about this in many of our programs. The most intelligent thing we can say is, I don't know. And the other thing that we need to do is we need to know when to ask for help. Pride goeth before the fall. In other words, people, I want my apartment. You're an idiot. In this sense, if keeping and paying your rent took all your money and you couldn't pay the money you needed for your job, then you've hurt yourself in ways that make no sense. There's no need to have pride. Unhealthy pride that's unrealistic. When I'm broke, right, I did a whole show on this, I'm mad and I'm sad and I'm scared. All of that very normal and healthy. I need to ask for help and let people know I need help. So it may be that, like I said, I've known people, they didn't have anybody to go to, but they told people, hey, look, I need help. And somebody said, hey, I know a person, they have a room you can rent, or you can stay in their garage or whatever. Okay, that's something. But you got to ask for help. In many parts of the world, not all, but in many parts of the world, there are government agencies and charities. And what they do is have places that you can go stay if you have nowhere else to stay. But you got to tell them, and you got to reach out. And yes, all of this is not super awesome, right? Super awesome would be, I have so much money, I can't even think about how much money I have because it's so much. And when I look at my bills, it's so easy. The bill's there. Look at all the money I have. I just pay all of the bills because it's so awesome. That's where we're headed. That's the goal. We said that, attain, maintain, and sustain my financial independence so that I have all this extra money, quote unquote, meaning my money that I have exceeds any of these bills. I can pay my bills for a year, right? In fact, that's a lot of what I do now with utilities, like the water bill and stuff like that, because they're small amounts, relatively speaking. So I look and I think, okay, it's this much a month. I'll just pay the whole thing for a whole year, so I don't have to think about it again for another year. It's much easier. It's much easier to think about something, once a year than to sit around every month and have to go through the hassle of setting up, I set up direct payment on my account. It's still a hassle. Like, whatever. Like, I paid it for a year or 2 years or 5 years, whatever, it's done. And that's what you do is you have more resources, but that's what you're working on. When you're temporarily, it's always going to be temporary. It's never going to be forever. Broke, then we're not going to be in denial and we're not going to be idiots about our own lives. Like, this is the time. All of our choices are bad. None of them are awesome. If they were awesome, we wouldn't be broke. So I may have to be like, oh, I've swallowed my pride and move in with my sister. I may have to swallow my pride and be at a homeless shelter. If they're out of space, here's the thing. The reason I said broke, you need a plan is you do not want to wait till the last minute. Especially if you're on a job, like a job where you get a paycheck, right? You know that you're headed toward broke way before you get to actual broke. So it's looking tight. It could be like, hey, everything was fine, but oh my goodness, something broke, my car broke down, and to fix the car, I had to spend all this money, and because I spent all that money, now I don't have the money to pay my bills. And that happens a lot of the time. That's why in many of your financial programs, people talk about emergency funds. What they're saying is you want to be able to be prepared. The refrigerator broke. And if I don't have a working refrigerator, then all my food spoils and I don't have anything to eat. So people think, well, I got to fix the refrigerator. But the deal is you fix the refrigerator, how much? That may cost so much money. That may take a whole month of rent. And if you don't make anything different at your job, if your paycheck is the same, where are you going to get this money from to fix the refrigerator? It doesn't exist. You're going to have to borrow it. So that's how people get into credit card debt, that they don't have an option to pay because they got the credit card because their income didn't allow them to have an extra, for when the refrigerator broke or the car broke, or somebody needed, their grandson needed money for school, for some event or something. Like, there's no extra. And because there's no extra, then people go into debt. The more you go into debt, then you're headed toward broke. And what I'm saying is you don't want to wait until it's, 6 months since you paid the bill, because then you've got the bill and the late fees. And if it was a credit card or anything that had interest, you have interest and over the limit fees. And now what you're facing is, you owe twice or 3 times what you really borrowed. You got to face this really much earlier. Much, much earlier. What do you pay first? You need shelter. And you need to be able to swallow your pride, and you're going to have to ask somebody, or you're going to have to move somewhere that's just cheaper temporarily. But you need a plan, and it's better to go to your landlord and say, hey, landlord, I know I paid my rent. I'm current right now. Everything's super awesome. Yet I've had some, unexpected costs. So I'm not going to be able to pay my rent that's due, coming up here for the next month. I'm not going to have it all. Because if you are a tenant that, takes care of the property and, a good tenant, and it really is temporary, and you tell your landlord ahead of time, right? So let's say your rent was due on the 1st of the month. About the 15th of the month, you realize, wow, I had to fix a refrigerator. That took $400. I have no other money to make that up. So come the 1st of the month, next month, in 2 weeks, I'm not going to be able to have the money to pay my rent without then not having the money to pay my car note and then not being able to get to work. If you tell your landlord ahead of time, before, like I said, I'm 2 weeks out. right? Right now I'm current, everything's great. Your landlord loves when we're current because then the landlord's like, everything's good, right? Not just current, but current that, and you're taking care of the property. Well, you're a good you're a good tenant. They're a good landlord. It's a win-win. If you go to them and say, look, this happened. I'm not gonna be able to pay it all on the first. In many instances, depending on, especially if you've been a long-term tenant and the landlord knows, hey, that's a good tenant. Everybody has, like I said, either been through this or a version of this or know somebody who has, except for the people that were born into, some elite, very wealthy family or something and stayed there their whole life. That's a very small amount of people. Your landlord understands. If you come to them when you're looking out at headed toward broke, many times your landlord could say, oh, okay, well, you've been a great, tenant. You paid all your other rent. I understand this. This is okay. In terms, it all happens, stuff happens to all of us. Maybe we can work something out. So maybe this month you can go ahead on the first and pay part of your rent. And then, we'll add we'll take some of the rest of it out of your security deposit, or we'll go ahead and let you pay back. So maybe on the first, instead of the $500 in rent, you can pay $250, and we'll take the other $250 out of your security deposit you already paid when you moved in. Or we can go ahead and take $250, and then maybe we'll let you pay, $50 extra all the other months going forward, so you can catch up. They can work stuff out with you when you go to them ahead of time because it shows normal, regular behavior. All of us, like I said, with the exception of very few people, have been through this or a version of it, or we know somebody who has, so we get it. It's when you wait. So you don't say anything to the landlord when you're headed toward broke, right? And a lot of people do this. And when they would come to my office as a lawyer, I know I sound like I'm getting a little bit stern because it hurt me to my heart. You lose control of the situation when you go all the way to broke and past and through broke, and you're asking somebody when you're already in debt to them and you've breached the contract for help. Because most of the time, it doesn't happen like that. Like I said, most of the time, everything was going okay. Right? We're good people. We don't go get apartments intending not to pay. We're good people, meaning, our word is our bond. We don't go get a car intending not to pay. We work, we have income sources or whatever, like we're doing what we're supposed to. It's something that throws it off. Usually it's an unexpected expense that we can't absorb because we don't have any extra money. We could only pay exactly, what we were paying based on our income. And if our income hasn't changed, but you had more debt, we don't have anywhere to go borrow the extra money. So if you reach out to people early, I am guaranteeing you, I can speak to this for the U.S. There is an alternative that's almost always available if you reach out ahead of time, especially for utilities. In most of the parts of the U.S. with utilities are things like the water bill, the gas, electric. Because the understanding is that people, without, the electric, in many instances, if they don't have the heat or the air conditioning, they literally will die. And people know that and governments know that. So many of those instances, if you really are broke and you go to them ahead of time, right? But when you're headed toward broke and you think to yourself, it's not going to happen. I'm not going to have all the money to pay that electric bill next month because what happened with that refrigerator and I had to fix that. I'm not going to have the money. Then you go to them ahead of time, right? You're still paid up with them, but coming up with the next bill, you're not going to be able to pay all that. And you say to them, I'm not going to be able to pay all of this. I had some come up. There's no way I'll be able to do it, but I have to have it, or I can't live here. I'll literally will die without my utilities. I'm not exaggerating. I'm telling the truth. In many parts of depending on the climate where you are, then that what I'm saying is true. So they'll have programs. They'll say, oh, okay, are you, and they'll basically be some kind of a version of you have to fill some paperwork out or do something online and say, hey, I'm low income or temporarily I'm low income. They'll have programs for senior citizens. They'll define that age differently, So if you're 80 years old and you were working and then something happened or you had a health situation, then they have programs where they're not going to let you die, right? They'll have a program that either I either can't pay right now and they'll or I can only pay part of it or whatever. But you have to go to them and tell them this and ask for help. Do not go angry. Yes, you're angry. It's not awesome to be broke. It is the opposite of awesome. But that's okay. Lots of things happen in life that aren't awesome. You can handle this. You just have to execute your plan and your strategy. And when you go to people, you got to go to them from the place of I need help. Because the truth is you do. Yeah, you're mad. Maybe you're mad the refrigerator broke. You're mad that your, ex-husband didn't pay child support like they're supposed to. You're mad that, you got sick. You're mad that you didn't get the promotion that you deserved. You're mad about a whole bunch of stuff, right? But the deal is, at this moment, I got to solve this problem. And there are people at all of the places you owe money that could be helpful. But if you go to them angry, which is what a lot of people do. I've been in court as a lawyer where they're having court for like evictions, right? Where people didn't pay their rent. And I've seen people in court with the judge. Now, the judge has the power to sign an order for you to be out of that place. And if you don't go out of there, they'll change the locks and they'll take your stuff and put it in storage. Or in some places, they'll just put your stuff on the side of the street. Or the judge can sign an order and say, okay, we'll give you more time, right? And I've seen people literally use obscenities, curse and scream at the judge, who's the one who's making the decision. That's not helping you. I know you're mad, but this isn't the way to handle it. If you look sad, I know you are sad. Anger is, sadness outward. And you ask for help. People will be more willing. I'm not saying it's a guarantee. You may be sad and ask for help. People may be like, tough, too bad, you didn't pay. But at least you're giving yourself a shot. When you get on the phone or you ask somebody in an office and you start yelling and screaming at them or whatever, then you know what? It's not helping. And a lot of the people that you deal with at offices, like the utility office, the credit card company, the people you talk to that are like answering the phones or like at the front desk, they're not rich. They're not necessarily not rich. Some of them may be. But those are not high-paying jobs. Those are low-paying jobs. So it's not like they're sitting there like, I do this because it's my dream. Some people might. But a lot of them are doing that job because it was the only thing available, and they're not making a lot of money themselves. They may not be able to pay their own bills. So they have enough stress in their own life. You to come and add more stress by yelling and screaming at them and calling them names is not helping you. Just selfishly. It's a not effective strategy. You want to know what to pay first. The problem is it's going to be dependent on your life. If you have options where there's somewhere you can go stay for free, then I suggest you explore that, because that's usually your biggest cost, right? And even 1 month without having to pay rent or a mortgage is going to help you. If instead of you leaving to go somewhere else, another option is you need to get some roommates. And I mean yesterday. That's why you don't wait until you're behind. You be honest with yourself, right? We're not idiots. We're smart. You can be smart and broke. Many of us are. You can be a good person and be broke. Stuff happens. And if we weren't born into royalty or some kind of family or somebody just gives you money, then you got to earn it all. And it's not easy. Life is hard. So if I can't go anywhere else, if I think, hey, I don't have any siblings and there is no shelter where I live, there's nobody at all, I'd be literally on the street, dying in the elements. Okay. Then you need people to come stay with you. This time you need roommates. And I mean, you need them like yesterday. That's why again, like I said earlier, 2 weeks out, you reach out to the landlord. Hey, are there any alternatives? Landlord may say yes. Okay, that's great. Take some of your security deposit, or we can structure it, on the other month's rent. Awesome. Or the landlord will say no. When they say no, then that door is closed. That's not an option. If you don't have anywhere you can go to stay, then and you're in a place, then another alternative is people to come stay with you. And it's time for some roommates. And there's all kinds of roommates. You might find some nice, great roommates asking around, telling people, hey. Just like I said, you swallow your pride. If you need a place to stay and you say to people, hey, does anybody know anybody got an extra room or garage or anything? Because I'm not going to be able to stay where I'm staying. It's not looking good. Then the opposite, you go and say, or you say both, right? You may say, does anybody have a place to stay? And say, does anybody need a roommate or know somebody needs a roommate? Because most of the time, somebody will know somebody. Oh, yeah, I know so-and-so. They're getting divorced. Or I know so-and-so. They're coming back from being overseas. Or I know somebody, they're looking for a place. They want to move out from their, grandparents' place or whatever. You need more people in. You need money. So you need to get some roommates. And you need to be nice about this. So, you claim you need roommates. And I saw this when I was going through stuff younger, and I'm like calling people so they need roommates, making my way in the world. Yeah, I guess I need a roommate. Okay, really? You're not even nice to me now. So I definitely don't want to live with you. Remember, it's still a deal. Just because you need a roommate doesn't mean you're the only person that needs a roommate. Other people need roommates too. So if you make it difficult for me to give you money as a potential roommate, I won't. I'll just go somewhere else. And that continues to hurt you, but it's not really hurt me because I'll find somewhere to live. If I have some money and I'm going to go be a roommate somewhere, I just won't be a roommate with you because you're mean to me on the phone. I'm not even going to come over there and look at that place because I don't want to see it. Because look how mean you are. Again, like I said earlier, yes, you might be, of course you're angry, you're frustrated, you're stressed out, you're scared. I get it. But when you yell at people or you're mean to people or rude to people, then they're not helping you. They're not going to hurt you necessarily, but they're not going to go out of their way to help you. And they're not going to want to come live with you as a roommate because you were yelling and screaming at them. Now, if you're like, oh yeah, I did place a listing on online for a roommate. Yeah. Oh yeah, when can you come by? See, like that. You need to be planning ahead. Okay, so we secured shelter. Either I'm going somewhere else, the government through a social services agency, a shelter, a temporary, cheaper place I can pay daily, weekly, a relative, friend, just random stranger that needs a roommate somewhere, or I'm bringing the people in with me. Now, when you bring in the roommates, you need to do some level, of checking, right? Do you have a job? Okay, where do you work? If you don't have the money to run even a super cheap background check, because you may not, because, the broke thing, then you need to do something to confirm, okay, well, I'm going to be confirming employment. That's what I do for all the applicants, just to make sure it's a safe, situation. See how easy this is? So it's not a guarantee, but what you're doing, and then they give you a deposit. Now, again, once you secure that, your shelter, and you need access to utilities so you can stay clean, obviously, and stay working, and then you're going to have some ability to try to have access for food and water. You're simultaneously preserving your income. You have got to be showing up at work. Like, this is the time you're going to show up early. You need to ask for everything you can think of. Extra shifts if you work that kind of work. You can ask around, hey, is anybody need anything extra? Did I mention I do dog walking? This is also the time. You need to simultaneously do everything you can to bring in income more while cutting bills. You can do other stuff for money. You can work another part-time job. You can do, house sitting, dog walking, depending where you live, child care, lawn services. I'm trying to think of, just anything that you can do. This is the time to start doing it. Now, I know you may be tough, to get any sleep because that's a lot of hours to work, but this is the time. And I think I mentioned this in my show when I talked about when I was broke, and hey, life's what it is. When I was really up against it, I went and was there's no other way to say it. I was literally a volunteer laboratory experiment. So there's companies that paid money for people to come and take experimental drugs, experimental medication. It was a lab, and they would pay for this. And I did that. And I knew a lot of other people. That's kind of the way I learned about it. They had ads on TV and on the radio, but also I knew people I knew from being, I was in schools and university. I knew people who did this, and they paid money. And was that scary? Yeah. I did one of them where I was, I can't remember how long it was now, but you literally go and you have to live there because they're giving you the whatever medication is that you don't even know. And I signed up for one that paid more money, so that you can leave, but if you leave, you forfeit money. So, and you get more money if you go and you stay there. So you can take some of them, or you just go there to the place, they give you medication, and you come back and they, draw your blood or measure whatever, and then okay, but that's less money. You made more money if you went and you lived in that place. And I did that, and I don't remember how long it was. It was a while, like a couple of weeks, I think. And the one I was on that I remember the most, that this is the last one of these I did. But you go and you live in the place, and I was on one where we were intravenously, so we had IVs, so they put like the IV in your vein in your arm, and then they just sort of left it in there because they were constantly coming and giving you more experimental whatever, or placebo, who knows. And I'll never forget, right? And that was in oh my gosh, for however long. And then whatever I was, the study that I was on, I never forget, we had to lay down on, medical stretchers for all of our dosing with these IVs. And so obviously your movements are limited, and, this is not, here's the deal. Broke or headed toward real super duper broke. What to pay first? Two parts. I got to bring in more money, and I need to be lowering my bills. I'm simultaneously working both sides of this equation. So is it something I recommend to people to go out and be, experimental study participants for money? No. Is it something I'll say never to do? I can't say that. I did it. You have got to be brutally honest with yourself. You got to open up those bills and see what you owe, and you need to start calling every one of those places and telling them before you go to the point where you're behind. Once you're behind, they move your account from like the happy customer service people, not happy, but like, the regular department to the department where the late people are. And those people usually are more trained on collections. Collections is a legitimate business. Somebody's got to do it. And but now that people didn't pay their bill for 30 days or 60 days or 90 days, so now it's not so gentle. It's more like, you owe us all this money. And collections have stereotypes against them. There's many ethical and professional people in that field, like any field, and there's some that are unprofessional and doing things that are unethical. But my point is, you want to try to avoid meeting them by calling the people themselves. And that's what I did when I was broke. Hi, people that I borrowed money on the car. Yep, whatever happened, not looking great for the next car note. Is there anything that can be done? The first time that you're going to be going into being, okay, so like I said, so my payment is due in 2 weeks. I know I'm not going to be able to make that payment and still be able to make everything else and keep the job, right? So I call ahead of time, weeks before this thing is due, right? I'm currently a good customer because I'm paying. And then I say, I know my payment's coming up, and whatever happened, they don't really care. You don't have to tell them details, but just whatever, something came up and I'm not going to be able to make it, what are my options? If you have not been late before, this is why it's really important you think ahead and be honest. If you haven't been late before, in most instances, like credit card companies, even when a car loan, right? You've never been late. Most of the time, I can't guarantee it because I haven't seen your contract. I don't know the exact terms of your deal. I have to see it, and you need to read what you signed. But most of the time, they'll have some sort of an option where you've never been late before. You're calling ahead, where they'll either let you skip that payment, just sort of move it to the end of your payment. So like a car loan, you pay a certain amount of payments and you're paid off, right? If you've never been late and you call ahead of time while you're still, on time, but you're talking about, hey, for the next one coming up, not looking good, and what are my options? Is there anything I can do to skip a payment or move a payment back, so that it's, I don't pay it like I'm supposed to, coming up in, 2 weeks, but I'll pay it, at the end of the car loan. It'll extend my loan a whole nother payment. They have all kinds of options when you're ahead, when you haven't gotten late. And if you call then, you can check. Call, even if you don't owe any money now and you're thinking, Courtney just makes stuff up. I'm not. I'm telling you. And most of these places, if you go on their website and you dig deep enough, now everything's online, there'll be some little thing somewhere that'll tell you about that program. But, okay, skip a payment or program forgiveness or program extension or ask payment extension. Even credit cards, especially in the States, some of them are on television commercials where it's like, oh, in the TV commercial, the person's like, oh, I forgot to make my payment. And then the credit card person's like, oh, it's okay. You've never had a late payment before. We're not going to charge you a late fee. No problem. We even have a skip a payment program or whatever. Like, you got to call before you go late, because then you have a lot of leverage and they're listening to you because they look in their little computer system or whatever and they see pay. That means in their world, good customer. Everybody wants to keep a customer. It's much harder to get a customer. Customer acquisition, the cost of getting a new customer is much higher than keeping an existing customer. And everybody knows that, except for a few people born into lots of wealth and power who keep that their whole life, everybody else in society has either known or gone through themselves a tough time financially. It's all relative. So they might not have been through exactly the same thing, but they've been through a situation where they're asking the same question. I'm behind, or I'm about to be behind. What do I pay first? So if you call them ahead of time, you'll be surprised at how much leeway you can get. If you went through all your bills and you ask yourself, what's the most dangerous? I say you want to do preserving your income, the job. You got to keep whatever it is you need to do that. And the second thing I'm going to argue is you want to think about preserving your credit. Now, this I know is a whole bunch of debate for some people, because the argument is, look, your credit cards, okay, you owe money to people, right? So some of the money you owe for services like utilities. Some of it you owe on contract, like, hey, I borrowed money for a car, or I borrowed money for a mortgage or a home, or I'm paying rent. Some of the money you owe is under a court order, like you owe child support, or you didn't pay your taxes and now you owe mandatory payments to the IRS or whatever. You owe things that are secured, like a car, right? Secured property means somebody loaned you money, but against like tangible property that's secured against. So if you don't pay, they just take the property back, right? We talked about that earlier. The least important thing is usually your unsecured debt. And like credit cards are classic, right? Unsecured debt. So you may think, well, who cares? My argument is this. Anybody who reports to your crediting bureau, your reporting bureau, you want to pay attention to, because you may have had a bumpy period here, 2 or 3 months that were really bumpy. But do you want to have this on your credit? So for 7 years or 10 years, it's messing up your ability to go out there and live a super awesome life because it's on your credit? I would argue no. So what I'm saying is this: there are some bills you owe that are not reported to your creditors. How do you know what those are? The first thing is you need to pull your credit report. We did a multiple show on that. I mentioned it earlier. There are links on the show page. You need to go, pay attention to that and look and see where you can access and see where is your credit report. Most of your utilities, they're not on your credit report. A lot of things that people do that are not really the smartest things, like payday loans, those aren't on your credit report. Anything where somebody hasn't run your credit, they haven't had access to like your personal number, whether it's social security number or whatever ID to run your credit, then they're probably not on there. Doesn't mean that they can't report there, but what I'm saying is credit cards usually are on your credit report. So you don't pay a credit card payment versus another payment that you don't pay that's not on your credit report. The other payment you didn't pay that's on your credit report, it's not going to hurt you that you didn't pay them because it's not on your credit report. Now it may hurt you in that you owe a late fee or whatever, but it's not going to be haunting you for 7 years. So I'm not saying prioritize unsecured debt like a stupid credit card. Not stupid. Credit cards are awesome, but they're stupid in that, we talked about, place to stay, food, shelter. We talked about if you don't pay, outstanding criminal charges and court fees, then they could arrest you and put a warrant out for your arrest. And so what I'm saying is with all of that, a credit card, all they're going to do is put it on your credit report. They're not going to issue a warrant for your arrest in the U.S. That's not possible. Assuming that this wasn't some other crime like fraud or something to obtain the credit card. But just simply not paying it, all they're going to do is write you letters and say you need to pay it, and then we're going to put it on your credit report. What I'm saying to you is you need to be proactive when you're headed toward broke, and they don't and be focused. So usually in most parts, in many parts of the world, in these states, they don't put stuff on your credit report like you were a day late. I mean, that will be not helpful for anybody. Usually you need to be at least a month late. So there's a lot. What I've been arguing all this time is, you're looking out ahead, right? So right now I'm current on all my stuff, but I know I'm not gonna be able to pay this stuff in the next few weeks because I don't have the money because I had to spend stuff on that one bill or whatever. So now I'm calling my, landlord. I'm getting a roommate. I'm seeing if there's any part-time work I can do, or babysitting, or dog walking, or car washing. A lot of times they're day labor places. I did this too. There's day labor places you can go in a lot of parts of a lot of cities, especially cities. And this is what it sounds like. Like you go to that place and people who show up, they're able-bodied, they go and they work that day. They're daily labor. Now there's stuff like Uber. Now, of course, you would need a vehicle and, whatever the other requirements are, but or Lyft or these types of services where, you sign up for it, and assuming that you're vetted ahead of time, it's what you're doing is you're planning ahead of time for extra money. At the same time, you're calling everybody you owe money to see what the options are. Because if you haven't been late yet, most of the time, the people are going to have something that they may be able to offer you to give you more time to catch up, while you're also bringing in this extra money from, driving around as a transportation person, or serving as a laboratory experiment or whatever. Like, you got a plan, like you're executing the plan. You're not super thrilled because this is tough, but you make it happen. In some instances, people say, hey, I have some stuff, I have a TV I don't watch, I'm going to go borrow, go take that to a place and get a loan against it. And they're usually called pawn shops, right? I'm going to go to a pawn shop and say, here's some stuff, I know it looks like I'm coming up on broke. So what would you give me for this? And then they'll take your stuff and they'll give you some money. And then the idea is you sign a contract with them that you're going to come back in a certain amount of time and get your stuff back by, paying them what you borrowed and some extra interest. I mean, is it ever a good idea to go to a pawn shop in terms of the deals that you get, in terms of, interest and what the value they'll give you for your stuff? No. It's not a great idea. The entire industry of short-term lending, right, is rife with awful terms, horrible interest rates and bad terms and all kind of horribleness. The reason it exists, though, is because you and I aren't the only people that have ever in our whole lives ever been broke. It's because, as I keep saying, this is a majority. People have experienced it at some level or know somebody who has. and the entire industries have sprung up just for it. I'm not going to a pawn shop as like my plan for financial independence. I'm going there because I'm temporarily up against it. And while I'm working on getting my other extra income coming in and I'm getting my new roommate, I also am going to scrounge up whatever money I can borrow against whatever stuff I own that I'm not going to miss looking at while it's in the pawn shop, so I get my money and get it back. So no, this is never a good idea as my first plan. But if I'm ahead and I'm not late on my bills yet, and I'm calling on my creditors and I'm saying, hey, here's what's happening coming up. I'm not going to be able to pay all of that, and I'm moving some bills back, and I'm getting extra time, and I'm doing a temporary payment plan, or I'm suspending whatever, and that's clearing up my debt. I'm lowering what I'm going to owe going into the next month where I know I don't have enough money. And at the same time, I'm bringing up extra money, doing whatever it is that I ideally have planned ahead of time. And like I said, some of these things where you go online are the same thing as day laborers. You physically show up at a certain location and boom, people come by and hire people to go out and do whatever. Temporary agencies. That's another thing I did. I ahead of time signed up with temporary agencies and different temporary agencies. You know, I can type, I can file, I can talk on the phone. I can do all kind of things like, you know, sort of basic stuff. And then temporary agencies would say, hey, okay, we have a contract for you. It's a day at some office filing. Okay, I'm there. And I'm working. I'm trying to do both. Not trying. I'm doing both of these simultaneously. I am bringing in all the income I can think of. The roommate, the extra work. Now they have online work that you can do, right? Elance and Odesk, where, hey, I can do stuff online for extra money. Look at me. You need to set this up ahead of time. You don't want to wait until now you really are broke. You're late. Now you're late on the bill. The moment you're late, now the clock starts ticking toward reporting you to a credit agency, you know, to a credit bureau for being 30 days late. But you don't want to even get to late. What I'm telling you is you don't want to wait to even get that clock started. You were proactive and calling everybody ahead of time and setting up whatever plan so that you weren't even getting there, right? So that, oh, okay, this month your car note, it's on your forgiveness plan, so don't worry about it. You don't have a payment due. So now there's nothing that's due, so there's nothing that you need to worry about clicking your 30 days. Like, you're still good. You're still caught up, right? Although you have extended your term. Is that ideal? No. What I'm doing is I'm saying that you need to preserve your income and you need to preserve your credit rating. And the first thing we did was looking from the Maslow perspective. You need a place to stay and you need access to utilities and food and water. All of this is you having a strategy so that if you preserve your income stream, and it was just that one refrigerator bill that it's killing you, but because you moved a lot of your bills, you know, because you hadn't been late before, oh, okay, well then you're going to do your skip a payment. Okay, great. Well, then now that gives me the time. So because all the payments went down, right? And I got my roommate or I was doing my extra, you know, part-time work on the side. Now I've made the money back to cover the refrigerator bill, and with my income, I'll be okay going into the next month, assuming nothing bad happens. Meaning nothing bad means a bad expense I can't absorb. So the other part is you want to be saving some of this extra money. What a lot of people do is they're stressed out, they're worried about money because they're broke, so they do all this stuff, right? I'm working extra, you know, I worked overtime, I did an extra shift, I got a part-time thing on the side, and then I got a roommate, and then as soon as they paid everything and it was caught up, then they said, well, I don't want to do all this, I'm tired, it's exhausting. So they didn't save anything extra, but they just quit doing it. They said, I don't need that roommate anymore, you know, I'm not going to work those double shifts, I don't need those double shifts, I paid all my bills. Well, yeah, that's great until you're going to come up against this again when some big bill comes up that you can't pay. That's why it's called an emergency fund. So don't just get to the point and say, "Oh, I did it. I fixed it. Got everything moved, or organized, got that extra money from mowing lawns. It's all good. Now I'm going to go ahead and relax and go back to my normal way and get my stuff out of the pawn shop and keep moving forward." No, you've got to save extra money so that for this to happen again, it would have to be worse. So if you save $400 extra on top of catching up on everything, then you know if the refrigerator or something happens to a $400 thing, then you have extra money. So you're not going to have to do all this all over again. But keeping an extra income stream or 2 or 3 is a good idea. You need more money. If you are more of a white collar worker, there's so many extra things that you can do. One of the things there's online organizations that will hire you to do, you know, proofreading and editing. Many of them require at least an undergraduate degree. Well, if you have that, put it to use. Part-time teaching. Substitute teaching is substitute teaching in the U.S. and many parts of the country is where the government has free schools for kids, right? Little kids, elementary, high school, middle school, high school. It's free, government public schools, and they have situations where the regular teacher, is not at work. She's ill or something happened, or he, you know, had to do something else and is going to a meeting for the other teachers and he can't be at his job. So they get a substitute, somebody, because they don't cancel school just because the teacher, I mean, that would disrupt the whole thing. So what they do is they get people who are qualified, they'll have minimum qualifications, and you come in and you substitute. You're there for just, that class or that day for that teacher, or maybe a week or whatever. And I did that too. Substitute teachers, it depends, but in many parts of the world can earn, depends on how much education you have and all other rules, but can and do earn somewhere around $100 a day. So if you're tight on money and you say, okay, I'll substitute teach, and assuming you have a schedule where that'll work, right? That's $100 extra a day, and go pick that up. 5 days, $500. So if you have, like I said, more white collar skills or higher education, you can do a lot. So this is substitute teaching. A lot of schools, vocational schools and community colleges and universities have teachers who aren't substitutes, but they're part-time teachers, and they call them adjuncts. You can be an adjunct teacher. Now, adjuncts, as that is meant, the word adjunct means adjunct to, right, something else. So this is, like I said, if you have a job and you go, oh, I'm going to teach part-time. A lot of people do this. I'll be an adjunct. I'll make an extra $20,000 a year. Well, that's a lot of money. And, that money goes to your emergency fund. That money makes your life a lot easier. An extra 20 grand, right? If you got a promotion at your job and made an extra 20 grand, you'd be like, wow, that's a lot of money. Yeah, it is. So why don't you pick this up? Well, online editing, adjuncting at your community college, substitute teaching. I can, a lot of what I do, and we've done other programs about this. I talk about make your skill inventory list. And what I'm saying, and that's where I am now. I'm talking about all the different ways you can make money. And I say it, I did it, I've done it, and it continues to be one of the most important things you can do to strategize. But you need to be doing this ahead of time. You don't wait until you haven't looked at your bills for 3 months because you're in denial and you're lying to yourself, and then you open them and you start crying or screaming because you think, oh wow, it's much worse than I thought, because it always is. That's because you waited 3 months. Now you're already late on something that's been reported to your credit reporting agencies, and so now your credit's going to be hurt. The credit is really important. If you keep your credit score high, even though it was bumpy, the credit score doesn't know that you had to go do that extra part-time work, and they don't know, and they don't care, and good, neither do you. Just like it hurts you that stuff lingers, what I meant is if you don't pay, negative things remain in your credit report up to 7 years, in some instances up to 10 if they're like a judgment against you or bankruptcy, okay? So just like the negative lingers, although over time it diminishes, right? So if it was something that was 6 years ago, it's not going to be diminishing your credit score as much as if it was 6 weeks ago. Not having anything negative on your credit report also continues to benefit you. And if you have really strong credit, that's going to make your life easier. It's going to make your life a heck of a lot easier. You can be broke and have strong credit and be in a much better position than you will if you have horrible credit scores and you're broke. If you have no money and you have no access to capital, which is why the credit score matters so much, especially in the U.S., it's because it's a big country, and most of these deals, when you go to borrow money from people, your credit score, because they don't know you, right? So you want to keep your credit score as high as you can, because that gives you the access to borrow money. And what wealthy people do, one of the things that helps them, because they have diversified assets, if something awful happens in their business or they were fired from their job, yeah, they're stressed out and everything, but they have other assets they can go borrow against. And they do usually know, you do see it, but it's usually younger people, like somebody who's like a young person who comes from wealth, and then they have bad credit scores because they just don't really care about paying bills, and they're immature. Usually, though, what you'll see, especially people who earn their income and their wealth, they understand how important it is to have a high credit score. Because when you're broke and you have resources and high credit, then you can usually borrow against stuff much better terms. When you go to a short-term lender, a payday lender, a pawn shop, you're getting horrible terms. You're getting really horrible interest rates and really bad terms, right? When you have really great credit, then you are delighted to go to a bank or a credit union, or they'll even have things called personal loans, which is basically your credit's great And also, they're going to ask. I mean, you have some income, right? Because we said you preserve your income, right? Little do they know something horrible happened with one of your investments, and right now you really are headed toward broke. But you have stuff you can borrow against. And when you read in the newspaper about some billionaire or some really rich person, and one of their buildings or one of their businesses went bankrupt, but they're still rich, and you think, how does this happen? Because they're diversified, and they understand that it's not necessarily how much money's in the bank, but it's how much I can leverage. Keeping a good credit score and having assets that you can borrow against on good terms helps you. If you have really strong credit and you can and you have income, and banks are going to ask, but you have a history of strong credit and income, they even have unsecured personal loans with terms much better than you're going to get, in a legal short-term lender, or they even have a legal, we don't talk about legal things, but there's a legal, like a loan shark is a criminal that you go to that just lends you money at horrible terms, even worse than like a legal payday lender. But they prey on desperate people. You don't want to be desperate, so that's why you're always thinking ahead. Preserving your credit score as much as you can is important. As much as you can. What happens is people get depressed, and this is what I saw, especially as a lawyer when I did bankruptcies. They really weren't even in that much financial distress, right? But because they didn't look at their bills and they just got scared and overwhelmed, they just quit doing anything. So they didn't open their bill, they didn't look at anything, they didn't pay anything, they didn't call anybody, they didn't do anything. So by doing that, every one of their credit cards now has reported them as late. If they had called, they probably could have had nothing reported as late, right? But they didn't. And now they were late, they're over the limit, there's an over limit fee, there's a late fee, there's all this kind of stuff that happens. At some point, many of the credit cards, and we talk about this in more detail on those other shows, will go out and they'll sell the account. They don't want to carry. Look, their job is to make money, so it's not going to make them money if you're not going to pay. Once they realize it's been so long and you haven't paid, they're going to go ahead and just write you off, right? They're going to take this account and move it away from a real business account that they're servicing and just sell it to somebody else. The other people will buy your debt, buy your account, and then they'll go out and try to collect from you. Often they're called collection agencies. And they're not even the people that you borrowed the money from. There's somebody else who bought the debt from that other company when that other company, quote, wrote it off, right? Because what those credit card lenders are in the business of is people using their credit card and paying the credit card fees. That's their business. Their business isn't people haven't paid their bill in 9 months and they call them every day to ask them for money. That's not their business. So there are other people who that's what they'll do. They buy delinquent accounts for very little money. Pennies on the dollar, and then they go out and collect. So there's a lot of things I want to point out that, as you can see, this is a show that's a multiple part issue. The big picture is you need a place to stay, you need something to eat and food. You need to not forget pride. The pride is that you're an intelligent, awesome person, just like I am and everybody else, and this happens. You need to have planned ahead, ideally. So ahead of time, you need to have called everybody you owed money to and cut deals. Simultaneously, you need to be thinking ahead about how I'm going to get extra money. And I'm giving you all kind of ideas, even in ones that they're not super awesome, but there's something. You do not need to lie to yourself. This is not the time. Stop. You need extra roommates, or you need to go somewhere else, or this is not a joke. This is very serious. You need to understand your credit and how credit reporting works and how it's going to hurt you for years. Preserve your income first. I am saying preserve your credit. I'm saying if you're in a situation where it's beyond, ongoing, beyond a month, beyond, I waived my fee this month, I waived my payment. They'll do that once, maybe twice, but they're not going to do that like every month. You had to have a plan for your income and a plan for, continuing to cut your costs. If you're not serious about this, then you're going to be in deep trouble. There are very few occasions where people really do need to file bankruptcy, personal bankruptcy in the U.S. Yet, you need to go talk to a lawyer, a bankruptcy lawyer, and see if that's something that might apply. It's very rare. Most of the time, people don't even owe that much money. Money's all relative. But usually, it's not even that much money. And usually, people would just call everybody you owe. Call the utility department, call the city water department. Here's the deal. All that stuff about I mentioned, you can get a warrant for not paying a parking ticket, or you get your car booted and towed for not paying, speeding tickets or not paying parking tickets. Do you know that if you check in most places and say, like if you call and say, hey, look, I have a speeding ticket, but I can't pay all of it at once. You know what? Then they'll say, okay, well, we have a plan. We put it in payments over a certain amount of months, nobody wants you to go to jail. It's a waste of everybody's money and time. You don't want the police messing around with people with parking tickets and speeding tickets. That's stupid. Stupid meaning it's not a good return on our investment as a community. We pay the taxes to pay for law enforcement to protect us from real crime. The fact that you didn't pay your fine, we want you to pay it, but we don't want you to, if you get arrested and then you miss work and then you're fired, like, see it dominoes. That's that thing. We don't want to have that happen. Did you call the court and ask them for time? I'm telling you, everywhere I've ever practiced law as a lawyer, there is absolutely the option where you can call and say, look, I don't have the money, but I'm absolutely going to pay. What are my options? And they'll say, okay, and they have some kind of plan that you can get on for very little money over time so that you can pay your parking tickets and still be able to use your car and work it out. It's when the key I want you to remember is this. The reason why being behind on your bills will destroy you financially, destroy your credit, have you out for warrant for arrest, make your life miserable, is when you ignore it. If you are proactive and you look at the bill and say, you know what, I cannot pay this parking ticket. You know what, I cannot pay this bill. And you call all those places and you say to them, I cannot pay this. I strongly suggest also, if you have access to the online or the library, you go read and see, because especially for stuff like parking tickets and things like that, I'm telling you that there's a process in place already set up. All you gotta do is ask for it. If you don't ask somebody for the payment plan arrangement or whatever, then they're not going to offer it to you because they don't even know you're headed toward broke. You got to ask. And nothing is anything but professional about that. Most people appreciate it. Oh, okay, yeah, you want to pay? No problem. Can't pay right now. All right, let's work it out. But you got to be willing to swallow whatever what you think is pride. So, whatever you need to do, legal, ethical, then it's the time. And you need to be, and I, even when all these things happen to me and I'm in the place and I'm a laboratory experiment subject and I'm on my IV all the time and everything. Yeah, that was very stressful. I'm not going to lie. Because you couldn't leave the place, right? Like literally I can't remember how long, but I want to say it was a couple of weeks. You can't leave. I mean, you can because you're not, it's not like you're held against your will, but if you leave, then you violate the terms of the deal because they can't really do the experiment if you leave because they're doing everything. They're measuring your food and they're everything because it's a control experiment so they can get good data, right? So if you leave, of course you have the freedom to leave anytime you want, but then you're not going to get your money or as much of the money. So I didn't want to do that. I didn't forfeit my money. So, but it was stressful. But on the other hand, you know what? I planned ahead. I did all the things that we talked about in this program, and I was focusing on the exact same things that we were talking about in this program. Preserving my income with expanding it with extra stuff like that, preserving my credit, getting all of the things that I can do to get my bills low and call everybody ahead of time before there's anywhere when we're just headed toward broke, and you plan ahead. And you learn. You can do this. And by preserving your credit and continuing to work on preserving your record as a renter, when you're a renter and you get evicted a lot, then it's difficult for you to get a new place because people are going to look at your record in the U.S. and see that you were evicted a whole bunch and they're not going to want you to live there. So you need to plan ahead. But if you go to the landlord and work something out where it doesn't count as an eviction, right? Because the landlord, okay, I understand, you need to change the contract. You gave me enough notice. I can get another tenant in here. All right, I'll go ahead and agree to this. You got to speak to people. And you being mad about this, hey, it's not hopeful. Other than the anger needs to motivate you to get your schedule together where you're working down all those bills in writing. You're working down, looking at the understanding of I got to preserve my income. Well, the first thing, shelter, right? And sustenance. And then I need to preserve my income because if you lose your job, then you're you're really headed in the wrong direction. And you need to preserve your credit to the best of your ability. But usually preserving the income is going to mean stuff like you need transportation, whatever it is, but you need to keep moving. You need to keep every little bit that you do, calling on the phone, going down to the city office for the utilities and sitting there and talking to the people, hey, can't pay, coming up, what are my options? I guarantee you, I know. I can't guarantee for everywhere in the whole world, but I know that for most of the world, of course they have a place and a plan and some program already set up because this is an average normal thing. And then be proud of yourself because you're planning ahead and you're doing proactive things and you're going to get through this. This is just temporary. This isn't the rest of your life. And as I said, when you look in the paper and you see really wealthy people and it's like, how do they, file in bankruptcy but they still have this other stuff? It's because that's one business or one entity that they have and they have other things they can borrow against. As I said, if you preserve the credit, you preserve your income, you keep doing this for a long period of time, so many options open up. So when you see people discussing somewhere like, oh my gosh, the worst thing ever, uh, to go to a pawn shop or to have a short-term payday loan. These are awful terms. They are awful. I mean, that's not an exaggeration. But the people who are saying that often have other options. You already started with, before you even thought you were headed to broke, you would have already asked whatever friend, family, whoever who you thought could have given you money. Some people do that when they're not even broke. Some people have a thing in their feeling of pride where they say, I don't want to ask for help. But here's the deal. You're going to have to ask somebody, whether it's the credit card company, to be able to skip a payment or whatever, or ask a relative to borrow money or whatever. But you're going to have to be asking, because that's the only thing that you have to do this. If you ignore it all and just sit somewhere and pretend like it's not happening until they turn off your utilities and they come repossess your car, and they change the locks on your place and evict you, then there's no one to blame for that but you. That's the ignoring part. That was really not intelligent. Look, again, this is not unusual. It's happened to me. It's happened to a bunch of people. That's life, right? Stuff happens. The thing is that you have a plan and a strategy. That's what we're talking about for this whole show. This is an expanded show. So when you go look at the show notes, remember, you want to think about the longer term goals. As I said, in the future, when you get to the point in the future where you have diversified assets, you have passive income, you have financial independence, then yeah, it's much easier, because when you do hit a lump in the road, which everybody continues to hit, when you have more resources and you have a long track record and you have really high credit ratings, scores, then, like I said, there's all kind of things that lenders will do. Oh, they'll restructure this for you, no problem. They'll let you consolidate things, no problem. You need a personal loan, no problem. Yeah, but you're not eligible for those when you're in the situation we've been giving examples of, right? So it's not like somebody says, hey, I could get a really great low interest consolidation loan against some of my equity in some of my property, my homes I own, or I'll go take a horrible interest rate at a payday lender. It's not that you're not choosing between those. You're doing these other things only because you don't have any other options. And if you're in a situation, and if pawning some stuff under horrible terms, for a few weeks gives you the cash to be able to stay on your plan, where you called ahead and you weren't late on anything, and you preserve your income and you preserve your credit, then I'm not going to be the one to say that was the worst decision. What I'm saying is it's in the big picture of it, the big picture scheme. If you go to a payday lender or a pawn shop every month, you're in trouble, because you're not changing anything. You have to change your system. You need more income, and you're going to need lower bills, and you're going to be needing to acquire new skills along the way so you can move toward financial independence and autonomy. But you got to be very realistic with yourself and just be honest. And the weird thing is that everybody will have different lists. So if you have kids, then you're going to have a different list, because you're going to have different things that you need to put on your list that if you don't. If you have medication, or some sort of medical thing that is a huge necessity, that'll be different. Your list will be different than somebody else's list. In that, you're going to have to move those things up where the consequences are more severe. And you need to ask for help. Again, literally just asking for help, you would be so surprised at how much it'll do to just lift your attitude and your energy by just getting that first bill to say, oh yeah, okay, we can do that. You can skip a payment, or we'll move that back, or you'll take some of that out of your deposit. No problem. If you ask, intelligent people ask questions, and you ask for help, and you need to do it. And there's not a one size fits all. The one size fits all is you got to go with and prioritize the stuff that's going to cause the most harm and be the most dangerous. But the deal is, it's going to be different for different people. And I'm telling you, you need to focus on preserving your income. And then you need to look at preserving your credit to the best of your ability. And at the same time, you've got to be ruthless. You need to call everybody, or go to their office and sit there and talk to people and just tell them in a very nice way, I need help. I'm paid up now, but I'm not going to be able to make this next payment. And you'd be surprised what that'll do for you on a temporary basis. That is not a long-term plan. Your long-term plan is going to have to be a radical change in your life. You cannot afford the bills you have if you can't make them going forward long-term. You have got to acquire new skills and education. We've done tons of programs, not tons, but we've done several programs on that. You need to move from where you make, $10 an hour to $100 an hour or whatever, or more. But how you do that, you're going to have to acquire different skills. And that'll change your life. But in the interim, you need to be really strategic and creative. and you need to be incredibly honest. And the last thing I want to say on this show, you need to be proud of yourself. I'm proud of you, because again, this is just life. It happens to everybody, except for the few people who are born into wealth who keep that their whole life. So the fact that you have enough enough ambition to think, you know what, I gotta have a plan. And then you have enough candor and enough honesty and to get out there and call everybody that you owe money to and start making those plans and be really creative about the income and be ruthless about cutting the bills, right? That is awesome. That is awesome. And I admire that. And I do hope, as always, I say on our programs, reach out, stay in touch, let me know how these things worked out. And again, this is a wonderful thing for you to do, to ask these questions and make these plans. I'm very proud of you. Thank you for joining me today.